What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 Podcast. My name is Mundungus Greavy, alongside my co-hosts Glenn Hauser, Cameron Parker, and a special, very, very, very special guest, Mr. Ty Walden from the Incomplete Podcast, joining us tonight. How are we doing, everybody?
We're doing good. I was going to say, it would actually feel incomplete if we didn't bring on Ty tonight.
Shut up, Cam.
What?
So bad.
I mean, I've heard that.
Lord,
I've heard that joke so many times, so I'm used to it by now.
Ty, you got to go to the Homage website. They actually, under the Broncos page, they have an incomplete T-shirt.
Oh, my friend actually bought me an incomplete T-shirt from where they were selling it at the school, not the school store. Jesus Christ, I'm in school, from the Broncos Pro Shop, and I was like, yes.
And Cam's nursing an injury from jumping on the Orioles bandwagon.
No, it isn't exactly. It isn't exactly jumping on the Orioles bandwagon. I just, long story short, my cousin by marriage is Kevin Gossman, and he is a starter, the ace for the Toronto Blue Jays, and so that's the T-shirt jersey that I have as Kevin Gossman. So it's definitely an Orioles T-shirt, and they had 100+ wins this year, which was a surprise. But it's more about repping Kevin than it was the Orioles.
I guess we can go with that. All right, so obviously this podcast is a little bit different, and you know why?
Why is that,
Mike?
Mike?
Win. We gotta win. Listen, it was a very, very ugly win, but a win nonetheless. Come back in the fourth quarter.
It was
what, Cam?
I was gonna say it was so bad that you texted in the chat that we have maybe an offensive problem to go along with a defensive problem, and then so I will say that you single-handedly sparked the comeback for the Broncos.
That's my entire goal. That's what I'm here.
Your
to
terrible
do.
take was the impetus for this comeback.
Yeah.
Wow. Even though I'm not wrong, but yes, my terrible take.
That's if you think that's wrong, that's your call.
Okay, so first things first, let's. I want to get Ty's take on the game, because obviously we saw like 3.5 like really shitty football, and then we had the comeback in the fourth quarter. So Ty, I want to get your take on that.
Well, you're not wrong there. Like the first drive. I mean, this is what 3 out of the 4 games, 3 of the first 4 opening drive touchdowns. So like, all right, like we're getting a good start. Like the only time it wasn't a really good start was against the Dolphins, but we don't talk about that anymore. But for some reason, I don't know what had happened, but of course we can all blame the defense. And then if we have Justin Fields out there looking like freaking Patrick Mahomes there with MVP. The throws that he had been making, and I was like, yeah, like an MVP, like. He'd been like a 10-year veteran and had like 5 Pro Bowls, something like that. Like it was the way our defense was making Fields look was absolutely like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen again. And then when they have 28-7, I'm like, here we go again. Here comes another like 40 to 50 point loss. Well, another 30 to 40 point loss. And I'm not going to my heart can't take it anymore. But then there was just a spark, and Wilson was like, you know what? We're going to go guide this team. And then that first quarter, not the third, end of the third, they got the touchdowns. Like, okay, like at least we're not going to possibly get blown out. But then Bears couldn't turn it over. The Bears like punted back, and then we drove down the field again. I'm like, okay, like there's still like 11. No, I think it was like 9 minutes left in the game at that point. It's like, okay, this is good. This is good. But what I didn't expect to happen was. Yeah, that's my comment down there. What I didn't expect was 2 minutes after that, Fields coming in. That was probably the quickest sack I'd seen the Broncos have in years.
Yeah,
it's like right as soon as Fields turns around and looks, Nick Bonito is right in front of his face. And I have to say, Boomer Sooner, because some of our Sooner players out there have been the reason that we have played so well. And then so the strip sack, and then Justin Fields' old teammate, Jonathan Cooper, returning it for a touchdown was just beyond beautiful. But I didn't celebrate because I knew the way our defense had been playing, it was not going to be pretty. But I'd have to say that turnover was a huge turning point. And then I would say it was a really boneheaded decision for the Bears to go for it on 4th and 1 when they tried to get us to jump off sides. It didn't work. Okay, kick the field goal. No, they went for it. And I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, I'd be going for the points. And they didn't get it, and that ultimately ended up costing them the game.
You know, it was an odd thing that they did do the whole let's lure them off the, across the line, and then took the timeout. And that's when I was with you, Ty. I was thinking they would be trotting out the kicker. But to their defense, I mean, they had been gashing the Broncos defense on the ground all game. So It wasn't that, much of a risk. I think I made the crack that on the neighborhood that Bill with his walker could have split the defense. But to our credit, I mean, the defense really did step it up. And then, I mean, that scoop and score, I think, gave them a lot of confidence. And Russ's play gave them a lot of confidence too. Like, we gotta do our end, hold up our end of the bargain. So it was a great second half, very complete team effort second half, and it's I for one am happy that we have that win on the board.
Yeah, the 24 unanswered points is crazy. I mean, and when you talk about the 4th down play, I talked to a few people at work, and I was trying to kind of correlate the analogy, but it was almost to a certain extent like icing a kicker, right? Like, when you ice a kicker, honestly, like when you ice a kicker, you're giving that kicker confidence to go kick that field goal. Like, and so the Bears roll out there, they draw the team off sides, which is kind of like what I did expect. Like, hey, they're going to draw them off sides, because they have been jumping off sides all game, right? There were the undisciplined penalties, which we'll talk about a little bit later for the Broncos, but so they had jumps off sides before, so they were going to try and get them, and they didn't. So then obviously, they went and called the timeout. Well, when you roll them back out to go for it, you basically hinted with you rolling, back out that you're clearly going to be going for this ball. And I think the question was just more about, hey, should Fields have run this football and not Khalil Herbert? But so, I mean, you have to give credit where credit is due. And I have the all 22 out there on Twitter, but the defense certainly deserves it, but, in terms of effort and, so on and so forth. But Alex Singleton deserves so much praise for that 4th down play in that stop. So yeah, it was a huge moment of the game. And then, oh, by the way, I hate to sound so toxic on this, but I died laughing when they stopped them on 4th down with my dad. And then from there was the bomb to Marvin Mims, like literally the next play, and then they got it in field goal range. And at that point, I literally just died laughing at that point because it was like, oh my gosh.
So what was your guys' take on people wanting the Broncos to lose in order to get the tanking going and start stripping this team down?
Do you want the truth, or do you want me to just try to sugarcoat it?
No, lay it out there, man.
I pretty much laughed at the fact that we won this game because I was at the belief that, so from my standpoint, I am not a believer of us losing games just to get a player, because first off, the NFL draft is such a crapshoot, and I know they're dubbing Caleb Williams as this generational talent, but look at what happened. I mean, he wasn't the first overall pick, but look what happened with Ryan Leaf. No, actually, look at Jamarcus Russell. How did that work out for the Raiders?
Yeah, I mean, it's Jamarcus, it's Ryan Leaf, it's some of those things. But I mean, I think the Caleb Williams stuff, it's fair to come to the conclusion that he's a pretty surefire, lock to be maybe like that Andrew Luck type of quarterback to come out. But I mean, still though, I even said it that like if the Broncos somehow do complete a complete tank and go for that number one pick, it actually will be a very impressive job considering the Arizona Cardinals. And granted, to the Cardinals' credit, they're actually playing really well. But like the Cardinals are going to end up with like possibly 2 top 5 picks at some point. I mean, because of the Texans and and their overall picks. I mean, like the possibility of you actually having the number 1 overall pick is actually less likely anyway. And the point still remains, and I tweeted it went viral. Russ is not the problem, and so we may not necessarily need Caleb Williams, and that's the dilemma that the Broncos are going to find themselves in. Is do you end up putting yourselves, and we had this conversation, Glenn and Mike, like last week and everything, but it's like that's the dilemma you're going to put yourselves in. Is it's that Alex Smith dilemma, that he's going to be your guy for this year, possibly next year, but who are you going to go with after that? So it's like, but really the point still stands. You don't necessarily need Caleb Williams. You really don't.
Let me point out something real quick before. So I pulled up some stats from Russell Wilson's first 4 games from last year and then this year. So last year he was 80 for 131 for 980 yards, 4 touchdowns and 1 interception, which, okay. But in Sean Payton's system this year, he is 89 for 132 for 1,014 yards, 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
You want another crazy stat? When did he achieve that 9th touchdown?
That was
game
like
14.
What? Yeah, game 14.
Yeah, which I think was the Chiefs game, right? Like where he had the 3 touchdowns.
Yes.
Where he actually came back and probably would have won, right? Like that was that game. So it's like, I mean, that stat alone, aside from the touchdown interception ratio, like that stat alone proves to you how efficient this offense has been. Mm-hmm. And that offense is not the problem, whether people want to come out there and actually say it's actually not the problem. And from what you saw, like in the second half of the Miami game, it was an issue. But I'm telling you right now, the reason why the offense is in the position that they're in is because the defense isn't holding the end of their bargain. They're digging the offense so far of a hole they can't get out of. And yes, it may have been the Chicago Bears, but this was a case where you truly saw Russell, kind of like the Chiefs game, put his team on his back and carry the load to victory, and I think that like that's the kind of game, and I think that like obviously I'm not trying to spin this in the sense of like, again, it's the Chicago Bears, but like any team, and I mean any team that puts up 28 points, that's the quarterback you signed up for. That's the quarterback you signed up for to go toe to toe with some games, like, even if it's 28 points, that's the quarterback you signed up for to go toe-to-toe, score the 31 points per game, and win in, those types of fashions. And so with what Russ was able to do with some of the help from some of his receivers and so on and so forth, like it was a true, like gut check performance for Russ in that entire offense.
And I do love now you're seeing the side-to-side comparison with Mahomes, because Mahomes' stats, aside from the record, are worse than Russ. Even if it's like 9 yards difference or something like that, it's single digits. But it's just the idea that here's a guy that absolutely was buried. I mean, this just says so much about Russ as a competitor, as a human that's able to put this stuff, in the back of his head, and just bounce back. The guy, and not talk about a chip on the shoulder, not talk about being wronged. I love the fact that he's positive all the time. I put out the other day too that he's on pace for 38 touchdowns, 9 interceptions this season, if he continues to perform like he is.
Isn't it 40 something? Isn't 4,000 yards too? Like
yeah. And if you asked people ahead of time if they could sign up for those kind of stats, 100% of Broncos country would have said yes, absolutely. As far as the offense being the issue, where I'm seeing the biggest problem right now is there's a lot of undisciplined play, very ill-timed penalties. The pre-snap penalties are still a problem. You can tell it, like Peyton is pissed about this. Like
he is.
That's got to be turned around. And we need to see more Jaleel McLaughlin. and more Marvin Mims. So, those are the three things that I would change on the offense, or I would pinpoint as things that really need to focus on.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest problems that I had in that Bears game, and even in the Miami game. Like, you see Marvin Mims at a certain point, and then he just disappears. They don't give him the ball, or he's not on the field, or something. And then we finally get to see Jaleel McLaughlin in the Bears game, and it's like, where was he the games before? Like, that's my issue, is that it seems like the playmakers aren't getting the ball when they should be getting the ball. And even on Twitter, they had, Rod Smith and Philip Lindsay talking about, where are the receivers? Why haven't they touched the ball yet? I think that's where you kind of get into that. Obviously the penalties are a big thing, but why aren't playmakers getting the ball?
So, and I think that what's interesting is if you actually look at the statistics of that game, Jerry Jeudy was the most targeted receiver. And actually, like, that's kind of like what it should be. If he is your wide receiver one, he should be your most targeted. But it's like, Courtland Sutton, for all the touchdowns that he definitely is accumulating, which is certainly surprising, you want to see him involved a little bit more. And he's kind of taken a little bit of a step back. But the thing is we mentioned it, like, you want to be able to see the players that you want involved in your kind of offense. And I think that right now, with the pre-snap motion and the motion that you're seeing with guys like Marvin Mims and Jerry Jeudy, it seems pretty evident that the offense is going to be predicated on both of those guys on their pre-snap motion and just utilizing them even in the open space. And so I think that going forward, you have to get those players, particularly the ball. Now, I will say, it's really impressive to see what the Broncos offense is doing without Greg Dulcich, because he was a key part of this in terms of, the yards after the catch and so on and so forth. But I also will say too, I think they're doing a fair share of throwing the ball around. And I know it may seem like there's not a lot of players, getting the ball and so on and so forth, but it does seem like you're seeing quite the balance on the offensive side of things. I agree with you that McLaughlin and some of those others deserve, more snaps and everything, especially Marvin Mims. But it's just like, it does seem like there's far more balance than maybe we're being led on.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that was being brought up was, you look at that first drive, and then you look at the fourth quarter. But other than that, we had like 8 drives where there were 3 first downs. It just seems like they're stalling at all the wrong points. And I get the fact that the defense is putting the offense in a bad position. Dixon had some bad punts. But at the same time, with the playmakers that we have, why are we stalling out so many times? Especially against the Bears defense that, other than the Broncos, have the worst defense in the league.
Right. Mike, I talked about the penalties. I mean, so it's 1st and 10. You get a pre-snap, movement on the line. 1st and 15. All of a sudden, your job became infinitely harder to get that first down. And there's where the drives are stalling. These holding calls. There's another 10 yards. It's the discipline that, holding happens. But to me, there's no excuse for a false start. I mean, when the ball is going to be snapped, you shouldn't be fooled by any of this thing. And it continues to happen at a pace probably commiserate with the one that was last year. And it just, you can't do 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It just isn't going to work.
I mentioned something on Twitter during the game. Like, how are we paying? Because it seems like the offensive lineman that is committing the most penalties, at least from my opinion, is Mike McGlinchey. And like, how are we paying this guy $87.5 million to commit a false start every other play, or a holding every 3rd or 4th play? I'm like he's a veteran. He's got to be able to know he's got to be able to be in sync with the linemen. Right. I mean, I know it's 4 games in, the team's still trying to gel together at some phases of the game. But as a veteran, you've got to know what they're going to see and how just basically play smarter football, because if I could point it out, most of McGlinchey's penalties have kind of been drive killers.
Yeah. And I don't want to play devil's advocate on it, but I mean, like, it is only 4 games and it is early. I'm not trying to, basically trying to say that it's not an issue, because it's very clearly an issue. I mean, of all the undisciplined stuff, and any of those disciplined penalties are killers, but the one that absolutely pisses me off, and I know it pisses Sean Payton off, are the false starts on 3rd and short. He mentioned that in his press conference. Like, those are the ones that are just absolutely drive killers. And I think that, like, when you have Mike McGlinchey, I mean, it isn't also just the false starts he's struggling with. He's struggling with pass protection. But I will say, it's like he's kind of like we need him. Like, we definitely need him, but like, he's also an unnecessary evil to a certain extent. But like, we need him also. And I do think that he'll be okay. But let's also not forget, too, that Jawan Taylor, one of the guys that we also wanted, is struggling mightily with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, and he was numero uno in terms of, with that Detroit Lions game. And ever since then, he's just been a hot button for some of those refs in terms of false starts and so on and so forth. Yep. And also, let's keep in mind that the right tackle position, there are very few and far between of elite right tackles that are in the NFL. So as long as you can be, a little bit above mediocre at right tackle, you're going to be okay. But to play devil's advocate, though, it is only 4 games. They definitely need to correct it. For sure. They absolutely need to correct it. But so this is something that needs to happen. And, this is something too, like, for a culture that you're trying to instill for Sean Payton, like, it's going to take some time for it to really bear fruit. And, and so again, I'm not trying to play devil's advocate on it too much, but like, the results, I think, will follow at some point.
So what was your guys' take on Philip Lindsay tweeting about Jerry Jeudy and what he said, or tweeting about the Broncos receivers? He goes, "Where are the receivers? All that money there to be no-shows." And Jerry Jeudy writes back, "Glad you got to watch the game from the crib, fam."
Best comeback ever.
Dude, I don't blame Jeudy at all for that. I mean, first of all, it's almost like an unwritten rule that these players call out other players about their money. So for that to come out, I mean, I think Phil may be just trying to settle in at the fan and fit what goes on there with some of these comments. But I didn't have any problem with Jerry Jeudy saying that. And then people went on Jeudy about going after Rod Smith, and I didn't really take it as he went after Rod at all. Rod said agree to Philip's tweet. And Jerry says, as a receiver, you should know how this football shit goes, but it was a good win, though. Mm-hmm. And people saw that as disrespectful to Rod. And I did not take that as he was clapping back at him. I thought he was just saying, like, we're receivers, guy. Like, but, I just was wondering your takes on those interactions.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I actually was I was listening to the Dave Logan podcast, and he actually brought that up today. And I didn't even know that those comments were even made until I listened to his podcast. And I can remember him like apparently he and Jeudy were on the plane, and then he told Jeudy just not to let that stuff get to him, which I can understand. Like, I mean, with Philip Lindsay, like, I felt like I could agree with the fact that he might have stepped a little bit out of line, just because Dave actually brought up a good point, is that the wide receiver position is one of the most
volatile.
As far as like, because it relies so much on schemes, it relies so much on whether the ball's getting to you, depends on if the offensive line can hold off, if the running backs can hold their blocks, and if the quarterback's accuracy and all that. And so shout out to Dave Logan for that, because that is something I did not know about until today. And so I would actually agree that I think Jerry Jeudy was in the right, because there's just so much that goes on with wide receiver that I don't think a former I can't say former running back because he hasn't officially retired yet, but it's something that he wouldn't be able to understand as a running back as to where Judy has to deal with as a wide receiver.
And this is an interesting twist on it, because I know that Jerry Jeudy himself, the name, is a hot topic for a lot of people on Broncos Twitter. But I think that Jerry Jeudy coming out and saying what he did in terms of the nail in the coffin and, saying like, it's truly about getting the W at the very end of the day. Like, saying that, like, I think that was the first one, right? That was the tweet that he said to Philip Lindsay, right, Glenn? That's what you said. Like, is like, something about like getting the W, like in his response to Philip Lindsay.
No, he the one response I saw, and maybe there were more, but the one response I saw was in result of, glad you got to watch the game from your couch, in essence.
Yeah. Well, I think that like to a certain extent, like, it's about the wins and losses. And I think that for me, it's also Jerry Jeudy sticking up for his team and sticking up for the other receivers that are in that room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the twist of this, and I took it more of a sign of leadership for me. Like, I mean, like, if you're kind of like being one of those guys that's a wide receiver one, like, you're looking at it from the standpoint of like, you want to make sure that you may not get those lion's share of the targets or whatever. And again, to circle back real quick, Jeudy was the most targeted wide receiver in that game. Like, Jeudy was the most targeted wide receiver in that game. So I just think that, like,
with 5, I mean, he and Cortland got 5 targets.
Yeah. So, I mean,
and 3 receptions each.
Is that low? Yes, that's a conversation for another day. But like, but still though, like, those types of games are gonna happen, and at the end of the day, you won. And so, and I think for the fans side of this, he had 52 yards receiving. What do you expect a guy like Jerry Jeudy to do every single? You can't expect him to have 100 yards every single game, and like, and I realized, there was that certain stretch of games where he went off, where he almost should have had 1,000 yards receiving at the end of the year, but like 50 some yards receiving and only 3 catches, that's already half to 100. So, I mean, like, you can't expect him to get to 100 in every single game.
He's due for a big game because he only has 11 receptions for 158 yards and no touchdowns.
And I was gonna say, it almost seems like Mims has replaced Sutton in the deep ball, jump up and go get it, catch it in double coverage, because that's what Mims is doing.
To a certain degree. I mean, Sutton is like the 50-50 guy, but like, I will say though that Mims does seem like
I think Mims could potentially be the outside version of what they were hoping KJ Hamler would be, and that's that deep threat.
Yeah.
Shout out KJ, just signed to the practice squad for the Colts this week, so he's going to be back in the league soon. You see Montreal Washington playing for the Chiefs the other day at the end, returning kicks.
Yeah.
Well, and for Marvin, you're having a really good season when the only bad play that you have is you lose a ball in the sun. I mean, which, by the way, that's undisciplined, right? Like, that's undisciplined football, So, but like for Marvin, like, he absolutely deserves more snaps and more attention because, like, we're talking about a guy that is arguably one of the most efficient wide receivers in the NFL right now. I mean, there's a crazy statistic of all their big plays. Jerry Judy's one of them. I think Brandon Johnson's one of them. But like Marvin Mims, you go up and down the line, like all the long passes that they've had on the year, it's Marvin, Jeudy, Marvin, Brandon Johnson. Like, it is all Marvin Mims. And so, like, yeah, I think
Mims only has nine receptions for 242 and a touchdown, Cam.
Yeah, so I think there's a fair argument to be made that Marvin. I thought he was going to end up with 500.
That's on pace. I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's on pace for a 1,000-yard season right now.
That's. I like that you said that because, like, I was going to say that I expected him to have 500 to 600 yards. He's on pace that, like you said, 1,000 yards. So he's well on his way to having way more of a productive year than I think a lot of us anticipated.
Do you guys know what his height weight is?
Marvin Mims?
Yeah.
Is he
I
like
think it's-
5'10"?
Yeah, I think it's like
185?
5'10", 5'11", something like that.
5'11", 182, and he plays much bigger than that. He blocks these guys out
Yep.
on these bombs where they're contested. And the guy is, I cannot believe we got him when we did. I mean, just a stellar pick so far. And I just can't wait to see what he does the rest of the season. I mean, just the guy's phenomenal.
I'll be the first.
21 years old.
Good.
I would say I'll be the first to admit, because I've watched Marvin Mims all throughout his college career, being an Oklahoma Sooners fan, and I was like over the moon excited when his name was read when the Broncos drafted him, because I probably didn't say much about it, but I'm like, this guy could be very special for this team, especially if we can start throwing deep, because especially in that Oklahoma Texas game where they made that huge comeback, I think it was 2021. He had like a huge catch off of Caleb Williams of all players, and had that, he like caught it and then just had to like stretch over for that touchdown. Like, just the ability to catch a deep ball like that and to adjust to get into the end zone. Like, that's where I was like, if the Broncos get this guy, like, I'm prepared for things like that, and I couldn't be more excited.
I remember that game. I remember that Red River shootout. That was the game when Texas lost it at the very end on a draw play of all things. Like, I remember that game.
Draw play with 1 second to go.
Yeah, like 1 second. Yeah, it is definitely impressive, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. And I mean, shout out to Brandon Johnson. I mean, like, Brandon Johnson's another one of those guys that if we're talking about people that are maybe making guys like Cortland Sutton expendable, Brandon Johnson's one of those guys that may be pushing that to where is a guy like Cortland expendable.
KJ was released by the Broncos. There wasn't a deal set in place.
Yeah. So Brandon Johnson, since I'm talking about stats, he has 7 receptions this year for 113, but amongst those 7 receptions are 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
Yeah.
So 16.1 yard average. I mean, we have a lot of weapons. And when you think about Tim Patrick and Virgil being out for the year, both of them, to have these other guys that we can count on is just very special. And that's why.
Now, Glenn, half of that from Brandon Johnson came from a Hail Mary, okay?
That's fine. But I do kind of want to go from the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball. We did see somewhat of a switch in the defense in the fourth quarter. Did they go from that soft shell zone to man?
They did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, my big question is, we've seen over the last couple of years, and I'm not going to name names, Pat Shurmur, where they would go into a game and stick with something that was awful and then kind of adjust halfway through the game and then go right back to what didn't work in the next game. Is that going to be the same thing we see with Vance Joseph?
I almost get the impression that Peyton told him to change it. Just with the confrontation or just
when they were yelling on the sidelines.
I think he said enough's enough. Like, we've been trying this for 4 games and this is just not working. I mean, we weren't paying man to man on Tyreek Hill with Patrick Surtain. I mean, it doesn't make any possible sense. So hopefully that is something that ends up changing. I mean, the fans wanted this switched for weeks now. So
second quarter of the Raiders game.
We'll see Sunday afternoon. Yeah.
Well, you know what I was gonna say. Like, part of me wants to give credit to Vance Joseph. Like, I want to credit Vance, but I'm kind of with Glenn on it. Like, I feel like I should be crediting Sean Payton a little bit more because of the conversation that happened on the sideline. Like, you do have to give right. Sharks.
I don't want that conversation with my boss.
Sharks with laser beams attached to their heads.
That's almost what the defense needs at this point.
Yeah.
Me. Stop pumping laser.
But it was great. Like, I kudos to the defense for what they were able to do. I also thought maybe we were seeing a little bit of like Drew Sanders spy fields at times. in the game, which was a nice little switch. They were playing a little bit more man. And if we're talking about forecasting a game plan to what they should do against Zach Wilson, that's exactly the kind of thing you should be doing against Zach Wilson. Obviously he went ham against the Chiefs, right? But he has a history right now of is not being a starting level quarterback, right? So you want to make sure he beats you through the air, and that's the best way to possibly do that. And so I think that kind of game plan is something that I think they should carry over, to the Jets game. But again, I want to give credit to Vance. I want to give credit to Vance so bad.
Then do it.
But I have to give credit to Sean.
You'll be the only one. Literally, you'll be on an island by yourself.
And I'm hoping that means that Peyton is taking over more control of the defense that we run. Not so much the play calls, but the style of defense we run.
It's funny. The main takeaway I had from that discourse on the sideline was that actually Vance's hot seat was way hotter than it was making it out to be, in terms of we could have actually seen a change at defensive coordinator had the Broncos not beaten the Bears.
Yeah, I think the whole house of Vance Joseph's seat was on fire after that Miami game. More like this is fine. This is fine.
So I think lip readers would say Peyton was like, cut your freaking sleeves. And Vance is like, no, I'm not doing it. He's cut him down. Damn it.
Yeah,
that's what we need in the next game. Make sure that he wears long sleeve shirts that has the elastic here that doesn't let him breathe, and cut the sleeves off about halfway through the game.
You know what's funny though is then they leave them on the ground. Did anyone else find that odd that the camera pans down and there's these two little sleeves?
And then the other question that we have about defense is, now that we're going into week 5, we potentially have a lot of players coming back that are either on injured reserve or PUP. It doesn't sound like we're going to see Baron Browning yet. It sounds like that's going to be more of a week 6, 7, 8. But there is the possibility. It sounds like Justin Simmons is going to be coming back. K'Wan Williams might be coming back. Mike Purcell, PJ Locke, all these guys that we've been missing. Is that part of the reason why the defense has gotten so bad? Other than the scheme issues, is that part of the reason why the defense has gotten so bad?
Yeah,
it has to play a major role.
Yeah, especially when you're. I was going to agree with you, Glenn, because I would say that basically losing all these key players right before the season begins, having these players go on injured reserve or just not making it out of the first game, and then you're basically at week 1 you had Simmons and everyone, and then just having these starters getting hurt and relying on these depth guys to at least get you to where you need to go. But what Kelly and I always say on the Incomplete podcast is that depth is probably the biggest thing that this team needs. And that is something that we hope when these other guys come back, that we'll start to see a little bit more of an improvement on the defense. But until that time comes, I'm just going to be okay, let's just try to get through this and hope for the best.
And the only benefit to having some of these starters be shelved for a few weeks is it gives these younger guys some real game action, even though they're not necessarily having stellar performances, but they at least gain some experience. So that really is the only benefit if the team's losing, but at least these guys are seeing some playing time. So then so then they can tap into that experience when the regular starters kick back in.
Yeah. And I think that when you kind of look at all those players that are going to be coming back, I feel like the more reinforcements on the defensive side of the ball, the better. And I think that if there was one play that really resonated with me in terms of how they missed a certain player, it was that guy right there. And that was the touchdown to Cole Kmet. And that was the touchdown, for where Kmet was just wide open. And I felt like, and especially, how do I put this nicely? Given the current state of where things are with Vance Joseph, you need a vocal leader on the field right now. on the
Mhm.
defensive side of the ball. And there is no one better at being a vocal leader than Justin Simmons. I mean, there were some moments where I think, maybe it was under the Vic Fangio tenure that I recall, but like there was moments where Justin was a defensive coordinator on the field. Like he was calling plays. And I mean, and so I think that like when you have that on the field and you don't have that, you miss it desperately. And so I think that, from the Drew Sanders point of view, yes, you would love Josie Jewell there, but I think the one thing you saw was just the reps, just the reps, I think, for Sanders. So I mean, like you don't want to lean too much optimism on it, but like you definitely saw him get better as the as the season was going on. But like Justin Simmons is the one for me, and I think the next one that's underneath that is K'Wan Williams. K'Wan Williams is the next one that I think is going to be big, that they need to have as soon as possible.
Did you guys see Nick Ferguson's breakdown of that play you're talking about, the Komet touchdown?
No, I missed that.
Yeah.
So he put out a little review of the play on his Twitter, and he was saying that if you look at where the defense is, they're in place where they're supposed to be. The only issue is that the safety that was supposed to be backing up Singleton went the wrong way, and I believe it was Turner Yell.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of following
surprising,
Komet, he went the other way to cover the other receiver, leaving Komet wide open.
Yeah,
because the linebacker was only supposed to go so far back, and he did. He jumped to try to get the ball, but there wasn't any help over top.
It's interesting you say that, Mike, because like I was watching the All-22 today, and I saw that play, and out of my eye, I thought I saw Turner Yell go the other way.
Yeah,
like and so like when you brought it up, I was like, yeah, he very clearly went the other way. So I think that to me, if anything, proves that you need 31 back in the lineup.
Well, and I don't know if it was something where like, because I'm not, I don't know how the plays work, but I'm assuming that he was coached that like, hey, you have an option. Like if you see this, go this way. If you don't, stick with whoever's on the other side. And I'm guessing he just missed something and went the wrong way.
Like a wide receiver option route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he zigged when he should have zagged. He
zigged when he should have zagged.
I want to bring up something real quick to the both of you, just to get some thoughts, because I was just thinking about this today. And so Sean Payton decided to, on this last game, to start Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonino instead of having Randy Gregory out there. So do we think this is more of an issue with Randy Gregory trying to get things together, or did he have more faith in Nick Bonino and Jonathan Cooper?
All the above.
Yeah, I think it's all of it.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't Coop that was taking Gregory's spot. It was actually, it was Benito.
Yeah.
So for a second-year player to be taking the starting role over a guy with an $11 million a year contract, that's pretty significant 4 games into the season when the guy's actually healthy.
Yeah, healthy.
And what about Frank Clark? What's going to happen when he comes back?
Yeah.
And
Baron Browning is as well, because and I think that the Frank Clark thing is so interesting in terms of Baron Browning, because I think let's remember Frank Clark move happened the day of the Browning injury. So if you were to layer that and spin it the way that we sometimes do in the national media, I think that if you were to look at it, maybe Baron Browning was the move and the injury for Frank Clark. And if Baron Browning comes back, maybe Frank Clark is the one that's on the outside looking in. That's when he comes back. But I think the thing that also sucks is
does he get cut?
Frank Clark, I don't know, but it's just but it's just one of those things. They also need about as much help as they can on that on that pass rush move or room. So it's you need all the hands you can get. So if they can keep Frank Clark and you have Browning and you have the emergence of Cooper and Benito, that's a big deal. And so I think that, for Gregory, and again, I'm a huge fan of Gregory, but he has been a massive disappointment. He has been a massive disappointment. And so I think that this is definitely something to monitor going forward, because he was also a contract that if they can get off the books, it's after year 2. So it's something that monitor. And if Benito is playing and Cooper is playing at the rate that they're performing at, sacks and pressures and QB hits wise, I saw something on Twitter that said they're on pace for 28 sacks combined, which so that's a crazy statistic. And like I think that like if that trend continues, then with Browning coming back, then you absolutely have to have that conversation that you need to move on from him.
Well, and I think that begs the question of when Baron Browning comes back, is he going back into the starting lineup, or is he now going into a rotation with Cooper getting the start and Browning rotating in? Are we going to see like Browning Benito, or are we going to continue to see Cooper and Benito?
Dude, how do you bench Jonathan Cooper at this point? Like,
Right.
I think they're going to ease. My take is they're going to ease Baron Browning back into things, and there is a lot of rotational activity at the edge in the Broncos defense to begin with. I don't see him starting right off the bat, even though he did. He's the guy. I mean, the fans love him. I hope he can stay healthy, but I'm very interested in seeing who starts this week. Why would you change when you had Benito with the sack and Coop with the scoop? How do you change that starting lineup?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess for me, it's like I understand there was the fumble and the scoop and the touchdown, but outside of that, we've had a huge pass rush problem. And so that's why I'm wondering, like, I'm not saying that Benito and Cooper are playing poorly. Like, I love what Benito's doing, and I love that we have the emergence of Cooper, but like Browning is that guy. Like, he was drafted to be that guy. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's like, wouldn't the pass rush get better potentially with Browning back in the lineup with Benito on the other side, like we thought it was going to be anyways?
I feel like you're answering your own question, because it's just like I feel like, for Browning, they're probably going to ease him in because one, that's the smart thing to do coming off of injury, and once he's fully healthy and ready to take that full load as a pass rusher, I think that's when it'll be interesting to see where the Broncos go in that edge room, right? Like what they do with it, because Benito is playing really well, and and maybe they find it to where maybe it's best suitable for Browning to be that third guy behind Cooper and and Browning. I will say though, and it's one of the other reasons why Randy Gregory is maybe expendable, because Baron Browning is the one player of that entire edge room that is the most talented that can make Randy Gregory expendable. And so I think that with Browning coming back and him, we said it before, he's a Von Miller type clone. When you see him rush the passer, the way he dips, the way he spins, the way he creates those array of pass rush moves, it just screams a Von Miller type of pass rusher. And so when he comes back, you definitely can see that. And I think that not only will he help in the pressures for quarterbacks perspective, but he also is going to help the run defense. And I think that we should also give our flowers and kudos to Zach Allen. Zach Allen's not been impressive through 4 weeks, but Zach Allen and DJ Jones really played really, really well, in that third and fourth quarter to also help, spark the comeback as well. So, but if you get that kind of, pass rush help better, and, the depth is, vitalized, then I think you'll definitely be talking about a much better front seven.
So one more question before we go into the Jets game. In the Dolphins game, we saw Drew Sanders come in for the injured Josie Jewell. Looked like the game was way too fast for Drew Sanders in that first game. Against the Bears, I'm not saying he played great, but it looked like there was a definite improvement over what we saw in the Dolphins game. Do you think that Drew Sanders is going to play Josie Jewell out of the starting lineup?
Not right now, I don't think.
I'd say eventually. I mean, just the way the contracts boil down, Singleton got a 3-year deal. Sanders, was low round pick, second day pick for the Broncos. I think that was the whole plan, is probably to make a change on Josie after this year. That would be my speculation.
Yep, that's my take as well. It's eventually, but it's all gonna. The only reason why it's gonna change is the play of Josie Jewell. If you see a rise in play from Josie Jewell, is when the conversation is going to be had that we need to be re-signing Josie Jewell. But because he's on that 1-year remaining contract, which is this year, and he's going to end up being a free agent, it bears watching. Now, to your point, to your Drew Sanders point, he definitely played better in this game. Now, the first 3 quarters, and it wasn't just him. I mean, it was like the entire defense. I mean, because one more time again, you had not just a half where the Broncos made Justin Fields look like an MVP, or like the actual top pick that he was. Yeah, the actual top pick that he was. But they also allow Justin Fields to throw for 16 out of 16 again, by the way. And complete 16 passes. So I mean, so again,
for the second week in a row, Cam. I mean, Tua had a long streak of consecutive passes, and Fields only got, I believe his got broken on a Hail Mary. Am I wrong on that?
It did get broken on a Hail Mary.
He was almost going to break the Bears record for consecutive completions, and
he did
ended up.
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah.
Okay. All right. My bad.
Yeah, he had like his normal full game stats in the first half.
Basically, without running the ball.
I hate giving the guy a hard time, because I don't think he's
surrounded by anything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think that you're.
What are his cheers?
Yeah, you're seeing the Sam Darnold argument with Fields. Like you're seeing the Sam Darnold argument with Fields, but I just think that, like, to go to the defense, it's like for Sanders, it's like, it's not just him, but like, you definitely saw the improvement though from Sanders from the first quarter to the fourth quarter, like the way the defense played, the way the run defense played, running sideline to sideline to kind of catch up a little bit with Fields. It was a little bit slow at times with the way he was trying to, spy Justin Fields, in terms of like, you just wish he was there a little bit quicker, in terms of like, here's a 5-yard scramble versus a 3-yard scramble. You just wish it was, he was there a little bit earlier, but there was some definite improvement for sure.
So let me ask you guys this question. It's pure speculation on our part, but the Bears presently have the first 2 picks in the draft, based on their own pick and the Carolina pick they got from the trade this year.
Yep.
Say they go with Caleb Williams if the season progresses as it is, and they end up with the first pick, and Justin Fields becomes expendable. Would you, as the Broncos, give up a 4th or 5th round pick to put Justin Fields as our backup quarterback under Sean Payton?
Yes,
absolutely.
I would do it too.
Absolutely.
It's. Ty? I actually think he does, like, from that game alone, he definitely has some talent to be, especially with, okay, so granted, if that's the way it goes and we don't get Caleb Williams like some of Broncos country wants, which whatever that is, I would definitely, from that game alone, from the game against us, I would not be mad if we got Justin Fields as our backup, especially with how young he is. And with Russell Wilson's contract and how he's aging, I mean, he could, like, Wilson and Fields would be like a good, like, mentor protege type of thing. And then just have Justin Fields get ready. And then once it's time for Wilson to go along his ways or ride off into the sunset with hopefully a championship, Justin Fields could actually, like, jump in there with a little bit of experience, learning from not only Sean Payton, but from Russell Wilson. And I think that would really benefit him in the long run.
I love watching, like, Glenn's facial reactions when people are like, yeah, Russell Wilson's old. And Glenn's like, He's old.
But
I call him young man.
Well, Russell, I think, is around my age, so I shouldn't say old.
So with Fields, I think it's the Trey Lance argument, right? Like when we were having this conversation about Trey Lance, it's like, should the Broncos trade for Trey Lance? It's that same argument, but like that's the thing that we also have to keep in mind is Peyton loves those mobile quarterbacks. Like he loves those mobile quarterbacks, the quarterbacks that are they're not the maybe the most accurate in the world, but they can definitely throw the rock, right? Like they can throw the ball, and they can run it some. And so I think that having Justin Fields, I'm not saying he's going to change positions or by any means or be like a Taysom Hill, but his versatility and what he's offering in terms of Fields is going to, I'm sure, intrigue Peyton. I think that the thing that's going to cause a little trepidation on, the Broncos and Justin Fields is what does the league think of him? Like, what does the league think of him? Because, there will be some other teams calling for services, whether that's, the Atlanta Falcons or, maybe the Arizona Cardinals if, Josh Dobbs doesn't, if Dobbs, falters or something and, they end up not giving it to Kyler Murray or whatever. Like, so I mean, like there are teams that are going to be trying to kind of figure out what they want to do for their quarterback future. And so Fields, is going to be, one of those interesting options to monitor for sure.
Think about that. We could end up with Fields and Surtain and just shut everybody up at that.
Yeah.
Like,
but it's like Justin Fields, I think, has shown enough, especially more than Trey Lance. Like Trey Lance played like a couple games and then was out. Justin Fields has at least shown that he can play ball. Like if you look at the Bears offense, they have nothing. Like no offensive. It's almost like if you took the offensive line off of the field, he would have just as much protection as he does with them on the field.
They could have added Chase Claypool and would be nothing.
He is the most sacked quarterback in the NFL right now, and it's not even close.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think.
Well, I don't know. Daniel Jones got whacked for 11 sacks last night.
Okay. Well, that might have caught up then. But like, if you took Justin Fields, having shown what he's shown, and put him on an average football team, I think he makes that team better.
I think the key is like, I'll use air quotes, a competent offense. Like if you put him in like a competent offense, you're talking at least a much better situation for Justin. I think the thing that I'm trying to like wrap my head around is I just realized that we played the Chicago Bears, whose offensive coordinator was Luke Getsy. And then now we'll be playing the New York Jets, whose offensive coordinator is Nathaniel Hackett. And we know that Getsy was the offensive coordinator that Hackett wanted. So we know that they were some best friends. So I just realized this, but is it possible that maybe to the Bears, and I should say from Luke Getsy's point of view, it was personal because of the comments that were made by Sean Payton?
Man, I don't think so.
Am I being too much national media right now?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, listen, I've been called hot take guy. So now I think you're definitely by you, Glenn.
Oh, that's right.
Sure?
That's right. So DNVR Broncos had, they have Pat Surtain on every week, which is awesome. And Todd Davis asked him today if they thought, he goes, Ezekiel Elliott got a tribute video from the Cowboys. Do you think Nathaniel Hackett's going to get a tribute video on Sunday? And Patrick's like, I don't think so. It was so funny.
Oh, my gosh.
So one of the things that we did not mention is Sang Bassi gets released from the team today. Yeah. Did we add somebody as to why he got released, or it just?
I think he was just out. I think he was just
Traquan.
Yeah, Traquan Smith, but he's added to the practice squad right now.
No, he was brought up.
Oh, was he brought up?
So they signed him to the practice squad and they brought him up?
I think that's what
all the people hating on Traquan Smith, and he makes it to the full roster and Bassi gets cut?
Well, if he was,
Let me confirm that, guys. Hang on.
Because I thought he was on the, on the practice squad, but that would be crazy if he was signed. And then
No,
Mike,
Dwayne Washington got moved up, so that makes me wonder.
Okay.
That makes about the misinformation. That makes me wonder if Javonte is not going to be healthy enough to play this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they're going to slow play it. But it was. Did we find out what the thing was with his hip?
Hip flexor,
Hip
flexor. But I think they said it's not serious. I will say though, and this is a conversation I had with Sayer on Sunday. He texted it to me, and then the moment he said it, I realized that that's a fair comment. But like, it's crazy when you think about that. Jaleel McLaughlin may actually end up being the best running back on the roster in 2023, and I think that the reason why I say that is because I think you see Javonte still recovering from his injury. Because I think there's times when he's running, he lacks the burst. He lacks the burst to hit an open hole, or he lacks he lacks all that quickness and explosion that we've kind of come to seeing from him. And I think that that's just because of the ACL injury and him recovering and so on and so forth. So so hopefully we see that a little bit more in the season and in the season with what we've been accustomed to with Javonte. But it's crazy when you see what McLaughlin is doing, and you kind of take a step back and you see what Javonte is doing right now. Because I think
the small openings that he can slide through are just ridiculous. At the bursts at which he can do them.
And kind of going back to the beginning of when we're talking about the offense, I am a little surprised that Jaleel didn't get more carries in that game with what he did with the 7 that he had.
No, let me.
He was 7 carries. He averaged like 10 yards a carry. Yeah, but I think
for 72. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I think that was like his biggest workload to date, but like you cannot, McLaughlin was one of the main reasons why the offense got back into the game. Like obviously we were talking so much about Russ, but McLaughlin was a huge reason why, they got back.
He scored the first touchdown too.
Yeah, he scored the first touchdown. And if you go out and you actually look at that play on all 22, it's actually like breathtaking. Like, to what Glenn mentioned earlier about how he hits the hole, like it is crazy how he squirts through and how he's shifty enough to evade a defender. I said it, and then obviously the Broncos fans, myself included, have been clamoring for guys like Austin Eckler maybe next year. With what I'm watching from McLaughlin, he reminds me a little bit of Eckler, like the way that he's shifty enough, the way that he moves with the ball in his hands. He probably has to do a little bit more in pass protection, right? But like the way he is with the ball in his hands as a runner, it reminds me a little bit of Eckler, which is funny because Lombardi was his offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Would you even say possibly a prime Darren Sproles by any chance?
Yes.
I guess that's Mike's affirmation.
I've said Jaleel McLaughlin makes sense being used as a Darren Sproles type back.
Yeah.
Looking at the Jets game, which I'm very excited for because Glenn and I are going to be there.
Nice. They get to wear these beautiful helmets.
Right? Snow capped with the all whites or with the all oranges. It's going to be sweet. How do we see this game turning out? We saw a different Jet squad against the Chiefs than we had earlier in the season. What are we thinking with this Jets game?
Can I say one thing is that if anyone had on their bingo card that Zach Wilson would outplay Patrick Mahomes, I would say you're a liar.
Yes.
Yeah. But if there's also one thing that we know in the course of this season and how it's going on the defensive side of the ball, Zach Wilson will end up being Joe Namath on Sunday against the Broncos. So, and I will say, admittedly,
but he's going to want to kiss Susie Colbert.
Well, I was going to say, in one of my fantasy leagues, I put in a waiver request to pick up Zach Wilson. So I just want to, as far as maybe to play him.
Have you lost all your games already?
No, it's like, I need to play a quarterback.
Bye week starting.
Yeah,
You're right.
So
my biggest concern with the Jets this week is stopping those two running backs. That's Zach Wilson doesn't scare me. I feel bad for the kid, just that whole Rodney Harrison disrespect afterwards.
Yeah,
he really is. And I love the fact that not one person has agreed with him and that people have come up and actually defended him from,
Chris
all
Jones.
different types of sports.
Yeah.
Chris Jones handled that great. LeBron has even stepped in. But it's the running backs. We haven't been able to stop the run aside from that 4th and 1. So that's the thing that scares me the most. What about you guys?
And I'm hoping that if they stick with the more man coverage that our secondary is better at, that's going to leave the front 7 available to focus on the run.
Yeah. What about you, Ty?
I think my biggest concern is going to be the Broncos offensive line going against, because the Jets have I had to say it's probably a sneaky good front 7.
I don't know. It gives me heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, I was like heebie-jeebies. So if we can just keep Russell Wilson clean and hope that Sauce Gardner doesn't commit any phantom pass interference calls on like a Marvin Mims or a Jerry Jeudy, anything like that. I would say defensively for the Jets is something that'll be a little bit concerning. But other than that, Zach Wilson played a good game, but I feel like it's just going to be one of those where it's just going to be like, can he build off of that win? Well, not build off that win because he was close. I'll give him that. Can he build off that? How will he take from what he was able to do and almost beat Kansas City and going into a Denver team that they both have the same record, but what's going to happen as far as like when Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper, if they're both coming right at Zach Wilson, is he going to have like a, oh my God moment like Geno Smith did when Aaron Donald ran his way?
So good. Oh my God.
Yeah. I think that to piggy off a little bit, and by the way, I was so I was laughing when they called the holding penalty on Sauce Gardner. Two, there were actually people on Twitter, couch potatoes and actual what we thought were smart people coming out and actually saying that where was the holding penalty? I didn't see the holding penalty. And then 3, to actually hear Sauce basically confirm he holds on every single play, saying that he had been doing that the entire game and they weren't calling it. So you basically admitted you've been holding the entire game is what you basically
and all last season.
Right. So I think for me, I think those are definitely my top priorities as far as like what you guys have mentioned. I will say too, to Zach Wilson's point, they have to win the turnover battle. I think one of the biggest things that sparked the big thing with the Broncos and in that comeback was obviously the turnover battle. Obviously, you don't want to pin too much on the game clinching interception, but like that's still a big moment, and statistically, that's when you win the turnover battle. So, and with Zach, you need to be able to create those turnovers, and I'm hoping we do see the man-to-man. I'm hoping we do see some moments where you see some creative pressure that happens with guys like maybe a Drew Sanders coming from up the middle, or or something from Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito, or maybe you get something creative where this is something that Evero had done last year, but to where you see Bonito and Cooper coming from one side and Gregory coming from another, or vice versa. And so I think that if there's certain ways where you can get creative, create a lot of pressure, and get to Zach Wilson's face, maybe you'll create some unnecessary throws. And I like Justin Fields, and the reason why I say turnover battle is like Justin Fields, you can at least bank on him making at least one stupid play in the game. You just hope that one stupid play is going to cost them the game.
Right.
Yep. So do we think Denver walks out with a win, or do we think they get their 4th loss?
I'm going 38-24. Broncos.
Okay.
Sorry.
I was waiting.
I'm gonna go 23-17 Broncos.
I
Whoa.
will say if they score 38 points on the New York Jets defense, they have officially put the nail in the coffin that the Broncos offense is back. Like, I mean, so if they score 38 points, that will be impressive. I think apropos to what I've been saying in terms of the season and the season prediction, I had them losing still to the Jets. I think, right? I had them losing to the Jets.
Mike, can you remove him from the show, please?
Wow.
So I have to stay true to what I predicted, right? I have to stay true to what I predicted. That
was before Rodgers got hurt, though, Cam. So you are allowed to alter. That was a major change. Believe me, Mike and I paid a little bit higher for tickets with the Rodgers QB than the Zach Wilson QB.
Yeah, which, by the way, have you seen Jets Broncos ticket prices now?
No.
It's like what, $60, something like that.
Should have waited.
Okay.
So low right now.
Since I've been given the allowed, you are allowed. I will say that the Broncos win this game. And again, if the Broncos score over 30 points, they if they score over 24 points again, because like every single game that they've scored has been by 20 points or more. I mean, like as far as what they've scored. So if they continue that theme and they score 20 plus points on that New York Jets defense, and Russ plays, and I think this is the thing to keep in mind too. Obviously, they're going up against the Jets defense. Russ didn't play against the Jets. I think people forget that. Russ didn't play against the Jets last year. I think it was Brett Rippon was.
That's the only team where we allow Rippon to play against.
Apparently, yeah. So I say 20. I say it's a close one, and I say it's going to be 24-21.
Now I'm going to go under the assumption that Sean Payton is going to have us playing more man than zone. I'm also going to go under the assumption that we get defensive players back that are going to be playing in the game, such as Mike Purcell, Justin Simmons, maybe K1 Williams. I'm crossing my fingers. And so based on that, I'm going to say Denver wins 28-17.
Would that be a statement win? Let me actually say it like, so Glenn had 30-24. You know, and Ty, what was yours again? Like, what was yours?
23-17 Denver.
23-17, and then you have them by 2 scores, Mike. Right? If they win by 2 scores against the Jets? I mean, obviously Rodgers isn't in the building, but like everybody made so much of a deal about the Jets, possibly. But the more important question about their defense is: would that be considered a statement win for you guys?
I don't. I think it depends on how well Zach Wilson plays. Like if he plays like he did against the Chiefs and we win by 2 scores, yes. If he goes back to old Zach Wilson, then no.
Yeah.
I think also too, Mike, how complete of an effort it is in all 3 aspects of the game for the Broncos too. If all 3 are clicking and they're putting up points and a victory on the board, I mean, that is huge momentum going into week 6
Chiefs game
at Arrowhead, Thursday night game, Taylor Swift cutaways. You know,
at least 11.
I thought it was 17, but I don't know. But I think the overall performance of the Broncos more than just Zach, to me, is going to be what really sets the Broncos on the map for this one.
Well, and now that you mentioned the 3 aspects of the game, offensive and special teams.
There are 3 aspects to the game. No, 3 phases to the game.
3 phases. I would like to bring up that it appears that Sean Payton made the correct decision in making a trade for Will Lutz. And I say that because Will Lutz has missed 1 field goal and 1 extra point, both in the first game. He's been perfect since. McManus has missed 2 field goals, and Maher has missed 4.
Yeah.
And Lutz has bounced back from all the criticism that was poured upon him after the first game. And quite honestly, rightfully so. If you're a kicker and you're missing an extra point, I mean, that was the game. And I thought that was going to be the game the moment it happened, Yeah. But to his credit, guy's been perfect in following 3 weeks and has not let that hinder him and his success with the team.
Oh man, I will tell you, I almost got scared for a second when I saw that kick and it did that little,
Oh, it did. It did the move. Yeah.
And then went back and
I did one of those like, oh no, like not one of these things again. And then, but no, Will Lutz is not a klutz. So we are not going to be calling him, Will Klutz anymore.
Lutz.
Yeah. So, or as Big Mike said, Big Nuts Klutz. Big Nuts Lutz.
Big Nuts Lutz. Ooh, I like that. Big Nuts Lutz. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Anything that we need to talk about before we go?
No.
Just
we just covered it with the big nuts.
Well, yeah, there we go. That's how we end the show right there. I do want to thank Ty for joining.
Put a tea bag right at the top.
Just tea bag right on there. I do want to thank Ty for joining us on the show tonight. Ty, where can people find you?
They can find me. My Twitter handle's right there, or X, whatever the heck it's called. I'm still calling it Twitter, at TieFlyGuy15. Incomplete is at in_come_pleat_2, as Kelly refers to it, because there's 2 of us. Want to point out that we are going to have a pretty big show. Cameron knows why, but it's going to be a big show coming up Friday. Oh, God, I wish.
All right. Well, again,
we can also find Ty in front of a TV watching his beloved Philadelphia Phillies right now.
Hey, they're up 3-0 right now, bottom of the 5th, so I'll take it.
There you go. I do want to thank everybody else for joining us in the show, or everybody in the chat. Make sure that you check out everything that's going on the MHRT network. We have had a little bit of a change. Instead of the cluster puck on Mondays, it is now going to be Thursdays at 8 o'clock at night. Just works better with everybody's schedules. So we've got shows on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the neighborhood on Sunday on game days. Go check that out. Like, subscribe, share, turn on notifications. Tell your mother, your brother, your sister, your dog, your cousin's girlfriend's dog, sister, anybody you can get a hold of. Let them know.
Hey.
What?
We got to make sure we hide all the wives and girlfriends when Zach Wilson
hide
comes
all
to town.
the wives and girlfriends, the mother's book clubs, everything.
Yeah.
Like get rid of those. But yeah, again, we love the Broncos. We love Broncos country. We love everybody out there in the chat. Peace out.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.